Good morning, all, and welcome to the Scrutiny Performance Panel, Service Improvement, Regen and Finance. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and then after that, I'll go around the room to introduce people that are in the Guildhall. Okay, so apologies for absence.
We've got Councillor Susan Jones and Linda James.
Do we know of anybody else? No? Okay, then can I go around the room and have people introduce themselves, because it's plainly obvious. We can see who you are on the screen, but fortunately you can't see who the people are in this room. So shall I start with Rachel on our left?
Rachel Percival, Scrutiny Officer.
Councillor Day Jenkins, Goulton Ward.
Councillor Cyril Anderson, Cabinet Member for Waste Parks and Cleansing.
Karen Gibbons, Library Service Manager.
Karen Davis, Principal Librarian.
Councillor Mary Jones, Dunbar and Clay Ward.
And I am Councillor Michael Locke, Councillor for Sketty Ward.
Councillor Peter Blackcombe, Borough Ward.
Thank you all very much. Can we have the second item on the agenda, is disclosure of personal and prejudicial interest? Members, I will be declaring a personal interest in the item number 7, the Recycling and Landfill Annual Performance Monitoring Report, as I know some people are involved in the industry. Is there anyone else who's got a declared interest? Any members? No. Any officers? No. If that's the case, next item on the agenda is the prohibition of whip votes and declarations of party whips. Standard item on the agenda for all of the scrutiny panels. Next item is item 4 on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody any comments or questions about the minutes? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. Then we move on to item 5, which is public questions. Unfortunately, we do not have any public questions, or fortunately, whichever way we want to look at it. So then we move on to item 6, which is the medium-term budget statement. The leader has joined us online, and I would ask if he has anything he'd like to say before we go into to ask the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being slightly late joining. Only from me, just to say, I'm sure Mr. Smith will obviously go through all of the technical nature of his mid-term budget update. But obviously, we are a day or so away from the full announcement by Welsh Government. And obviously, at this point in time, we don't have a firm indication of what it's likely to be. So we are a little bit hamstrung as we were at Council last week. But certainly, given the announcements by UK Government, the assumptions that we were working on from the previous UK Government, things have improved, and we do expect the settlement to be more beneficial to us than otherwise we would have thought. But of course, that isn't confirmed yet. In terms of budget pressures, we have for in-year, we have significant pressures, as Mr. Smith said at Council last week, in terms of both social care, and that is something that is affecting councils across Wales. And we have been lobbying Welsh Government very hard in terms of trying to help us address those pressures. We've got pressures in terms of teachers' pensions, teachers' pay, and general local government pay pressures. And again, we hope those will be fully addressed in the budget settlement in the next day or so. And of course, homeless pressures are ones that continue to build across Wales. We continue to try and address those as best we can through a range of measures, but given the significant uplift in terms of people needing housing assistance from councils and local authorities, given some of the costs in the private sector, as well as other factors which have cost of living, etc., which have made more people more vulnerable, then again, those pressures are significant in the Police Directorate at the moment, and certainly in the Housing Department. And again, I want to place on record my thanks to the work that's going on by all of the teams to try and address the pressures and the potential difficulties that we have with the in-year budgets, which I know directors and cabinet members are working to address. But at this point in time, Chair, it's unfortunately no further granularity than we were able to give at council last week, but we do hope to have that detail in the next day or so. But I'll hand over to Mr. Smith now to go through his technical update.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Smith?
Yes, there's very little to add to what the leader said and what I briefed you at council on Thursday. If I thought it was a mugs game on a Thursday night, it's definitely a mugs game on a Tuesday morning when there is due to be an update on the Chancellor's comprehensive spending review timing, an assumption about efficiency savings across the UK, and undoubted consequential Barnets to come in due course. And as the leader has said, it's ahead of this afternoon's announcement of Welsh Government budget, which will give us a start of a pointer, and then tomorrow's local government settlement. I haven't changed my view that with a fair wind, as set out in the report, 6 to 7% is still achievable. We'll see how much of a mug I am inside about 36 hours. But the devil, as ever, is going to be in the detail. In the report, I'd set out to council that I expected inflation to be a bit higher, interest rates to be a bit stickier, entirely in line with where everyone else is in terms of economic forecasting. And of course, the biggie, which we did touch upon in council, and I was a little bit coy, and I intend to stay a little bit coy, is no one knows really what is going to be the devil in the detail on the national insurance compensation. It is not only the envelope which is at issue in terms of who is or is not compensated, whilst at one level it's very clear that public sector is due to be compensated. There are some weird and wonderful definitions in the UK national accounts as to what is and isn't public sector. There are undoubtedly going to be supply side issues, especially in social care where there is private provision in a mixed model economy. It is further complicated by national insurance contributions passed through from UK government to Welsh government, etc. Is likely to be by way of Barnet consequential and is woefully inadequate as a mechanism for capturing any minutiae of detail about differential wages, differential contract styles, differential degrees of public sector employment versus private sector. And then the real complexity is that lowering of the secondary threshold. And you've seen a number of major employers, retailers, etc. across the UK. And clearly there are very differing views as to the degree of impact. Those that have got traditionally lower waged sectors with lots of part-time workers are disproportionately disadvantaged. And we have quite a number of those in a number of our facilities. So I'm still very nervous about the degree of compensation and what will wash through, because to some extent employers won't start paying this until next April. It's going to be an interesting one. I did reread the budget announcement. Public sector was not guaranteed to be fully reimbursed, just that there would be compensation. And I think there's an awful lot of devil in the detail to come. And it's an extremely interesting one because I suspect in a year's time, we will be able to say how much we handed over to HMRC as we passed public sector money round and round and round to see the degree to which we were or were not compensated. The leader also touched upon a number of other items that are due in the next couple of days, but also builds on stuff that's come in the last week or so. Cabinet is Thursday. I'll be giving an update on the second quarter, and as the leader has alluded to, it's difficult in the current year. We are starting to see a number of the specific grants offered one-off in the current year finally coming through in December for things like teachers' pensions from last year, teachers' pay this year, and we hope that there will be some addressing of that in the settlement that comes tomorrow, but I can't really add much more. The one that remains nervous for me is national insurance, both envelope, quantum, calculation, degree of reimbursement, and the absolute nuances of it's probably going to be different for every employer, different for different councils on the degree of insourced or outsourced work. But out of courtesy, I'm here to answer questions, but I do reserve the right on any of them to go, dunno, ask me again in 24 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there any members who need questions? Councillor Jeff Jones. Councillor Jeff Jones is coming a bit late. He was sitting alongside his colleague, Councillor Mary Jones.
She got there first. Yes, sorry, Ben, perhaps looking at things on a doomsday aspect. You know, the figures you actually got there, direct costs. I know national insurance, 8 million plus indirect costs will be significant, so many millions. On a worst case scenario, what sort of figure are we actually talking about? I know we're talking about getting probably recompensed. What sort of figure are we actually talking about there with the two together and perhaps with other costs?
So again, it is difficult for me to entirely answer because there is a live consultation with providers over fee increases. But if you take our own estimated costs at 8 million, I do have a figure in mind for social care providers. Unless you press me, I'm minded to still say as coy as I was in council, but it is several £1 million, which I have factored into my planning assumptions, and you could double or treble it for the supply chain. So our 8 million direct could result as well in at least the same again indirect, but I hasten to add not all of that is social care provision. I do have a figure that I have priced as of the other 21 authorities in submissions to Welsh Government for onward lobbying to HM Treasury, but as they are part of the overall equation of what is a reasonable offer and negotiated settlement with providers, recognising that they will need to incur those increased national insurance costs, I am going to stay fast for now and not reveal my precise figure, but rest assured that middle one in terms of social care is millions. It's many, many more millions across the piece in terms of the potential inflationary impact on all of our bought-in services as the whole economy faces. At the margin, you're still talking about inflation instead of being 2, maybe 3, maybe 3.5, not a return to 11% increases. But it does expose the issue of what's it worth. It might have a value in cash money terms of what's it worth in real terms if inflation is a little bit higher. The one certainty we have got at the moment is it is only public sector to be compensated. So we will be directly compensated for direct costs. I expect us to be directly compensated to fund fire because there's no mechanism for funding them. Police, I suspect, will not need to put it on precept. They will be able to be compensated through principal Home Office grant and a modest amount of revenue support grant that they get. But it is interesting when you start to look at all the definitional boundaries of what's in and not in public sector and what funding streams are available for a compensation event to occur, which may be many, many, many months away. It's at that point that the nuances start to unravel from what was a very easy headline, public sector will get compensated net, rest aren't, and that's very, very fuzzy at the margin, and there's not really been any movement in the last couple of months, unfortunately. As I say, unless you press me really hard and have a change of heart, I'm not minded to reveal my pricing assumptions on specific uplifts that might be necessary for social care providers. I trust you'd understand there's a commercial sensitivity element to that. Thank you.
Yes, so really, you mentioned social service providers and so on. You know, we've actually got contracts with these people with regards to costs. Would it actually mean that all the contracts will have to be renegotiated, or?
There's always a degree of annual negotiation in terms of cost increases, and those providers will undoubtedly point to force majeure type events, like if there is a significant increase in the national living wage, if there is a significant taxation change. I think there are grounds for them arguing for both of them, and that clearly there will be a degree of negotiation and expectation of a degree of compensation in fee increases. That is par for the course. You can be certain, I am sure, that contracts will go up, and they will go up more than they would have done before the increase in the national living wage and the national insurance employers contribution. That's a policy decision for UK government. I don't think I'm saying anything political or controversial. 2 additional costs have been loaded on all employers. And where they are private sector employers that are providing services to the public sector and are not compensated, it will be for the management of those organisations to decide, as the Chancellor has said, the degree to which they can absorb any of those costs or not. And we are all aware that social care is a very, very fragile sector. So my presumption is against them being able to just absorb them all. But as I say, it's a live negotiation. And equally, I've got to minimise the cost to public sector spend and try and get to a fair deal which is sustainable for both sides. But I think there's quite a lot of months of negotiation still to occur, Councillor Jones.
One other thing, actually, we'd be disappointed if the uplift is not 6 or 7%. Specifically, what exactly is, well, 6 or 7%, and what is, if there's 1% less, what does that actually equate to?
So that one I'm prepared to be a bit more concrete on. My planning assumptions throughout the MTFP build and budget build, and I was relatively more positive than other treasurers, was that I expected £27 million to be added to our overall envelope for aggregate external finance. that is about 6.4%. So I've not changed my mind. So that range 6 to 7% is 24 to 27 million, and I expected the 27 million end. There is a nuance on whether NI is in or out. I have assumed it is in. It looks like it's likely to be outside and additional to the settlement in due course, because basically no one can agree what the figure is. A 1% change in RSG and NNDR combined, what's called aggregate external finance, is over £4 million these days for this council. 1% out is 4 million quid a pop, and you're all well aware that council tax is heavily geared 3-4 to 1 against aggregate external finance. So my assumptions throughout have been important, because every 1% I'm out by 4 million quid, which is 1% on AEF, is 4% on council tax, up or down. So it's important it lands in the right sort of zone, and I haven't changed my views throughout the whole of the budget build process. Time will tell whether this punk's got relatively lucky again. The big issue is when you unpick it, most of my assumptions as to why it was such a, on paper, sizable increase was looking at all the promises and compensation events that have been made by both UK government, current and former, and Welsh government. We are due to be compensated for administered price rises in respect of teachers' pensions, millions, teachers' pay, millions, national insurance, millions. Barnet consequential for teachers in England, millions. There are 4 or 5 or 6 components, each of which are several million, which was why I was able to form a view that my starting position for budget build was I would consider 6 to 7%, 27 million quid, and that'll be the judge by whether I'm a happy boy or an unhappy boy. The devil will, of course, be in the detail of what that's meant to provide and what it's compensated for. But that's a flavour of what it is, Councillor Jones, and it's easier for me to comment on that because I've been consistent throughout in terms of discussions with directors, heads of service, and cabinet members as we try to form a set of budget proposals ahead of actually knowing anything with certainty. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you. So just follow up on that, Ben. You're anticipating that all the UK Barnet consequences on teachers' pay, pensions, etc., will come through the RSG as opposed to a separate grant?
That is correct. It depends on the sequencing. So to some extent, teachers' pensions was from 2 years ago and anticipated. It came in as a specific grant this year, literally in the last week or so from Welsh Government. I would be surprised if they chose to continue it as a specific grant. It's in their choice. It's core spend for us. So given that we've now got a specific grant offer in the current year, albeit in the last week, it would be an obvious one to transfer into RSG. I think from indications from press releases from the First Minister that came out on Friday, that if the budget passes, that the intent was that the one-off additional support announced for teachers' pay, some general support, was that they would both be baselined into the settlement. That would give a very strong clue that you would expect them to also be in RSG. I think it is extremely likely, given the timing of the hour, that national insurance will either be not in at all and take a punt and hope the money turns up, albeit with a promise that it will turn up, or it be an assumption about a specific grant. What tends to happen with these things is if they're late in the day, they're in specific grant, and then you'd expect to transfer in the following year. So the key is always not to just look at cash to cash, but what's the like for like increase in the settlement. Which is the way it's normally presented. Welsh Government normally presents it on the like-for-like basis, the correct, fairer way. But it is also important to look at the cash value, because I will give more details on Thursday, but every treasurer in the land has seen that promises made previously on teachers' pay compensation and teachers' pension compensation between UK Government and Welsh Government have tended to be on the disappointing side about what treasurers have asked for in the first place. That may be as a result of a part of negotiated bargaining between the various parties, but history suggests expect to be a little on the disappointed side. But when you're talking of orders of magnitude of £5 or £6 million a pop, I'd rather be disappointed at the 85-90% reimbursement level than be faced with 0% reimbursement level. So I have to be polite and deferential to ultimately all of our political paymasters in terms of what's in the gift of UK government to give to Welsh government, and Welsh government to decide what to give to local government. So slightly long answer, but I thought it was also important to put some of those nuances in there, Councillor Black. But that certainly is my explicit assumption. I expect them all to be transferred into RSG, bar national insurance, but that'll be one of the nuances I'll need to pick up on if the number is materially different from the number I've guessed and have been consistent throughout as to whether I'm a happy or unhappy boy in a couple of days' time. Thank you.
So on the assumption that the national insurance comes through as a specific grant as opposed to part of that 6 to 7% on RSG, what are we looking at in terms of the overall budget, in terms of projected need for savings next year?
That I have a working assumption, but I'm sure it will not surprise you that given that nothing has gone to Cabinet yet, I will again be quite coy at the moment. The way I choose to answer that, I don't know if the leader wants to come in and say anything further, but in past years, a good year has still required us to find 15 to 20 million pounds worth of savings, a bad year 25 to 30 million pounds worth of savings. Those savings are set aside gross increases in budgets, and any reduction will be more than offset by material increases. So you tend to see the cash budget go up and up and up, but you'll be well aware, Councillor Back, that councils are still reporting, even before the looming settlement, a £600 million gap savings ask across Wales. Much of what will come will be to compensate for cash increases for administered price rises from UK or Welsh government, and not in themselves addressing some of those deficit bits. That's probably all I'd want to say before I'm going to give a specific answer on what might be there, because otherwise it'd be discourteous of me before we get to a set of proposals in front of Cabinet and on the public record for the consultation process to start. But certainly be under no illusion, the amount of money is to sort of cover us for cash consequentials. It doesn't in itself magic away that the need for still a significant savings ask, but a savings ask which is small in proportion to the likely increase in revenue support grant and the overall resources available to the council. I can see the leaders coming, so I should stop waffling at that point.
Councillor Stewart, leader.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add to what Mr. Smith has said, again, our intention, as in previous years, will be to publish the necessary budget proposals in January, as early as we can. But of course, it's not just the 1 year; it's that MTFB plan that we have over the next few years, and of course that will be informed by the comprehensive spending review decisions that we'll see from UK government. So. There are, as Mr. Smith has said, some big numbers at play in the jigsaw puzzle at the moment. A few of them we're far more confident on now than we were. And even if NI turns up as a specific grant this year outside of RSG, we will be playing for it to be rolled in as soon as possible, so it's baselined and then becomes less of a concern in terms of it reoccurring. So, number of moving parts on this one, but again, we'll come forward with the budget proposals as early as we can in January, because we'd rather consult having known what we're likely to get off Welsh Government, so that we can plan with certainty. And then obviously we expect the comprehensive spending review mid-year next year, which will inform the following 3 years.
Okay, so just to push Ben ever so slightly, are you anticipating this is a good year in terms of savings?
Yes. Short answer: it is at the good end of the spectrum, i.e.,
okay.
Yeah. Yes. I'll say no more than that. It's at the good end of. They are not at the high end of the savings ask, and certainly the amount of cash overall going in will be significant increases, I anticipate, to all budgets once those final moving parts are out. So yeah, I think I could certainly be happy to say yes, subject to what Cabinet and Council decides in due course, but it's certainly at the better end. There is money, undoubtedly cash money going in. It might not address much in the way of real terms, and it certainly doesn't address the issues that the leader highlighted in terms of the in-year pressures in homelessness and social care. None of those go away magically as a result of some extra cash money to cover administered rises, but it would be a very miserable treasure. And I know we can be a miserable bunch, but it would be a very miserable bunch to not be happy with getting an increase in the order. If the headline is 6 or 7%, we're always going to like 6 or 7 more than the 3 we had last year, more than the risk of a naught, more than the risk of a minus figure. So I think you can certainly assume I'm on the happy end of the spectrum, albeit it's still difficult choices, and no local authority is out of the woods, as I'm sure you'll see in the coming days and weeks as all of the English settlement comes out and all of the Welsh settlement comes out. But I'm sure the sentiment will be still difficult, but a darn sight better than it could have been before those slugs of cash money go in. The gripe will be, is it worth anything in real terms to fundamentally address the structural issues? That's probably what I'm going to say.
Thank you. Hopefully the Welsh Government will give you a good Christmas, Ben.
Any other members? No? I have a couple of questions, Ben. Mine are more to do with the government, the UK government budget proposal set out by the WLGA. It's about the investment rule and about the capital financing and the way in which the capital is being addressed. How much of this is actually going to affect the Welsh, the government in Cardiff and then local government? Because having read this about the way in which the new financial investment delivery and the government will ensure that there's a greater transparency of capital spending. How much of that is going to come down to local government? Have you any idea?
So at this stage, not really. Certainly not a figure I want to put on the public record. We have some inklings and some indications of some modest, I would only use the word modest, increases in general capital allocations likely to flow as a result of the settlement. I think the references to the UK government are around playing around with the business cases and evidencing them, and also evidencing the social value of things as much as just the spend, because I think it's been a common criticism of the Treasury, which does set the Green Book, the Red Book, and all of the other fundamental capital financing models, where sometimes we have to bid through to Welsh Government and sometimes directly to UK Government as to get a scheme across the line, about pricing the downstream benefits and not just the costs of schemes. So I do expect there to be some additional general capital in the system. I do expect there to be additional ability to borrow. But of course, the issue is interest rates are very, very elevated from the position at which we chose to borrow previously. And as I've set out in this summary report, and I've set out consistent in the last 3 years worth of MTFPs, my advice to you is avoid borrowing like the plague short term and wait for those base rates to come down to a level that I am happy with. I have consistently said for years, having taken the money at 1%, the next time I want to go back in is at 3.5%. That's 7-8 base rate reductions to go. Reference I made in the report to things being sticky is important, because we don't directly benefit, like same as other borrowers, we don't directly benefit from a base rate cut. If the Bank of England announces a base rate cut of 0.25%, but the gilts market goes back up by 0.25%, PWLB pricing doesn't move. So I still think some of it is theoretical and nominal. My appetite for giving you advice, it's an ultimate decision for Cabinet to recommend to Council. My appetite for going in any time before 27-28 is still at the very, very low end. It's always nice to have the theoretical ability to choose to borrow more if there is an underpin from Welsh Government and UK Government in the quantum going through in settlement and Barnett consequentials, but it doesn't mean you want to take advantage of them, because it might not be the best value for money for taxpayers. I know I'm never going to repeat 1-point-something%. This punk got lucky last 2 times. I would consider anything at 3.5% affordable and reasonable, but weighing the need to invest along with the value for money for current and future taxpayers. So there will be some ability, but I'm not likely to be giving officer advice to recommend to rush to take advantage of that, because I think borrowing rates are too elevated and too hot for us to consider at this point in time. But I think that's what that's referring to, Councillor Holly, in terms of some of this fundamental transparency. And I do wonder sometimes with both UK and Welsh Government going chancing my arm a little bit, when ministers of all ilks and all administrations announce fundamental things, they're going to look at every pound, that everything's going to be super transparent. The slight cynic in the Treasury in me does have an inward chortle. Just I'll hope you'll indulge me that one. I've heard it all before. I've been in this game for far too long, but I always like the theoretical ability to have a bit more flexibility than to have none whatsoever.
I tend to agree with what you just said, and I think it's smoke and mirrors to some extent with the capital. But I think that what's important about this is the change in which the borrowing is going to be treated nationally and how that will affect us. But I think that's a question we will have to wait and see, really, because I think that there is a fundamental change in the way in which capital is going to be financed and the way in which capital is going to be treated by UK government and then through Welsh Government down to us. The final thing I want to ask you is, you said about grants going into the RSG. History tells us that once we are told that a specific grant that goes into the RSG. The next time the RSG comes out, that's a rate support grant for people that, sorry to use the word in the energy. But when it comes out, we are told, oh, the money's in there, but it takes a great deal of effort to find out where that money is. And that's one of the issues I think that a lot of people will be concerned about, is where that grant money will go in and if it will be transparent.
You're right, Councillor Holly. I mean, there's a couple of bits I'd want to unpack there. The first is, whilst the WLGA's line and all treasurers' line and the leaders' line would be, we want everything in block grant as far as possible to give us absolute decision making locally. There is part of me that likes the step phase in the first instance, because if pensions money had gone directly in, I wouldn't even have had a reference point. The same with teachers' pay and others. I like a year of specific grants so I can at least see what theoretically nominally we've got in cash before it transfers over. You are right, once it goes into the labyrinth, which is revenue support grant and non-domestic rates, to squirt out the equally awfully named AEF, aggregate external finance, which gives you your dollop, your very large dollop. This is an authority that in the current year has got £420 million worth of AEF, so the new lot of porridge will splot in the bowl. What's in it is always interesting, because you can have those scenarios where, well, your RSG went up 0, but it would have been minus 5%. So therefore, hurrah, it's really worth 5%. That leaves people like me, but also the average person in the street scratching their head. If there's no money, there is no money. I'm absolutely confident there is cash increases coming in this settlement. But you're right, once it's gone in, that's one of the drawbacks. Once it's in the big bucket or swimming pool, to mix my metaphors, you can't then track it any further forward. But I am encouraged that at least 3 of the 4 of the components are likely to have had 1 year of a specific grant. And I personally prefer that stepping stage, because it gives us something to hang off. But once it's in there, good luck ever being able to track it thereafter. Some of them, to a degree, you can, because they're in individual components, getting even more technical. They break down you go from the overall block to standard spending assessments to indicator-based assessments. You can break down into little components of it, but you can never get absolute certainty of it. But the position of the WLGA and treasurers is always, we prefer ultimately to get things in block grants so that we have control over them and we're not subject to ministerial whim of the day, be that UK or Welsh Government, or changes of personnel. We respect that ministers are our main, the Welsh Government are our main funders, and UK Government of the Welsh Government, but it's not always helpful to have things in lots and lots of specific grants, and some of them are administratively cumbersome to bid for. But you're right to make the point, Councillor Holly, there is a risk, but I am slightly comforted that some of the items have come so late for teachers' pensions and so late for teachers' pay that at least I've got a starter for 10 as to whether I think I'm a win, lose or draw. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Smith, and the enthusiasm you have for believing that that is going to be the case. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other members or officers? No? Can I, on behalf of Councillor Mark Tribe?
Good morning, all. Apologies, but my laptop feed is playing up this morning. Before we go any further, I have to declare a personal interest in item number 7, the waste recycling scheme. My eldest daughter, Rebecca Tribe, is a manager there, so I'd like to put that on record, please. That's all it was. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you then, Mr. Smith, and the leader for the report and the midterm. And I look forward to what comes out the budget on Thursday. Okay, can we move on? The next item on the agenda is the report on the fund. Oh yeah, the recycling and landfill. Councillor Cyril, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah,
I can remember.
Thank you, Chair, for the invite this morning. My officer, Matt Perkins, is online, and also my head of service, Nigel Williams. Purpose of this morning is to monitor, challenge performances and action plan for statutory targets. If you bear with me, Chair, I'd like to emphasise a couple of points in the report. Thanks. I would like to thank the chair and the panel for their invite. And secondly, I would like to thank Matt Perkins for putting this report together. Can I ask if I could take through the key highlights of the report and then hand over to Matthew for any questions? Recycling targets, waste measures for 2010 and Welsh Government's national strategy towards net zero waste aims for 70% recycling and composting targets by 2025. The Council adopted a new waste strategy in 2022 to achieve these targets by 24-25. Our current performance, 23-24, the Council exceeded the statutory recycling target of 64%, achieving 70.5%. This positions the Council fifth in Wales for cycling performances, despite challenges such as large commercial sector and highly density housing. Financial efficiencies, the Council has the third lowest net expenditure per household on waste services amongst the 22 local councils in Wales, indicating efficient use of resources. The implementations of our actions, all actions from the Waste Strategy 22-25 services, Improvement Action Plan have been successfully implemented, demonstrating commitment to the continuous improvement in recycling efforts. Our future strategy is the Council is preparing a waste strategy 25-30, which will adapt to anticipate changes in national waste policy and emerging recycling technologies. The legislative changes, upcoming legislation, such as workplace recycling and packaging, extended produce responsibility, is expected to enhance the recycling efforts and improve overall performance. Yes, we have got the challenges ahead. The introduction of the deposit scheme, DRS, and changes to the UK emissions trading scheme, ETS, may impact recycling rates and costs, highlighting the need for proactive measures. These highlights showcase the Council's achievements in recycling, financial efficiency, and plans for future improvements amidst evolving legislation landscapes. If there's any questions, Chair, I'd like to hand over now to Matt Perkins, who's the waste manager in the Baling plant.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Is there members, any questions? Councillor Mike White first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I first congratulate the department on the success of exceeding the targets of up to 70%. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I can hear the voices. I'm sorry. But what I would like to ask, in regards to the interest of increasing the percentage of recycling figures, which is highlighted in point 2.2 of the report piece 2021, is it the department's intentions to take the promotion trailer into the city centre to further engage with the public, to have them to ensure that they are actually on board with what the council are looking to achieve regarding the targets for recycling. I know this time of year is very busy in the city centre, and this time of year people are going to put out more sort of waste and recycling. So that was just a thought that was the department just going to look at that option, Chair. Thank you.
I say these questions are going to be political towards Councillor Cyril Anderson. The technical questions will come back later, okay? Councillor Anderson?
Sorry, Chair, I was busy doing something else and I wasn't listening. I thought the question was going to Matt Perkins. Apologies.
Then what I'll do is I'll go through the councillors first and then come back to you, Mr. Perkins. Is that okay?
Yep, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Then I have Councillor Chris Evans.
Yeah, so home composting is something that's great for the environment. It's possibly on the increase in Swansea, but it's one of those environmental benefits that actually makes the stats look worse. So I'm saying, do we know roughly how many people are actually composting at home, and is there anything coming down the pipeline to help people start, maybe coming in from Welsh Government?
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can I then go? Is on upstairs? No, who's next? Yeah. Councillor Matthew Jones.
Yeah. Do you want questions to Mr. Perkins now, Chair, or do you want to wait? I've got nothing to say to.
The thing is, I've
Andy.
already started, going through the councillors, so I want to carry on doing that for the time being. And if there's any feedback that needs to come back, then you can come back on a supplementary, okay?
Yeah. Do you want me to go then, or?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I obviously like to echo the sentiments of Councillor White and say tremendous figure that the councillors achieved last financial year. Obviously, we're getting to the business end of how we get people to recycle now as well, down to a small core that obviously continue not to. So what are our plans to obviously engage with those people, as maybe what we're currently doing isn't quite reaching them? What are our plans obviously to roll out reusable receptacles, which I know are close and to being finalised. And I did have another question. New waste streams at the curbside. It's obviously difficult at the moment with some of the vehicles we use to try and incorporate new waste streams. I know some other councillors are starting to collect small, like wee items, like toasters, kettles, that sort of thing. So are there any plans, in the not too distant future to start collecting those? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Peter Black.
Do you want to pause and get those questions out of the way first, then come back?
It might be a good idea, actually, I think. Matthew, would you like to answer, start off with Councillor Mike White's comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in terms of promo in the city centre, we haven't directly sort of put teams in the city centre in the last couple of weeks or months. We've tended to sort of bounce around supermarkets, sort of student areas, and sort of target our team where we get the best bang for our buck, I suppose, effectively. You're quite right. City centre this time of year probably would be a higher footfall, and something I can have a word with the team leader about sort of going in there. We've tended not to use a trailer last sort of couple of years. It's quite awkward to get in and out sort of pedestrianised areas. We just tend to go in with gazebos and sort of smaller equipment, which appears to do the same job. But no, take your comment, and we'll do something in the way of action on that one. Thank you. I think the second question was about home composting, Councillor Evans. Yeah, you're quite right. Really good things to do. Though sort of completely sort of contrary to our performance targets. So in short, currently we don't really have any plans, and the Welsh Government are sort of, with the view of looking at sort of future legislation, they are reviewing what our future recycling targets are going to look like, and as opposed to just focusing solely on recycling targets, probably focusing more on carbon outcomes. So up till now, our targets and our sort of workload, if you like, is all based on sort of collecting as much recycling as we can, and probably not as much focus on minimisation, though that is going to change. And I think my thoughts on it is, rather than us trying to go off on our potential tangent and then finding Welsh Government wants something else, so they're going to give us guidance in the next few years. I'd suggest we would just wait for the guidance and then sort of act off the back of that, rather than potentially going down the wrong street to begin with, if you like. The last question then I think was sort of small core of materials not being recycled. So Councillor Jones's question and what we do in terms of additional recycling streams. Again, this is sort of looking ahead to probably some of the future legislation changes. So one of the ones at the bottom of the report, sort of emission trading scheme, is effectively a tax on fossil fuel materials going into energy from waste plants. So anything that's sort of made out of plastic is going to be sort of subject to a tax. So we have been sort of working with Welsh Government about looking what's in our black bags now and likely to be taxed in 2028 and what we can do to sort of improve recycling or sort of minimise our tax liability. What the first materials we're looking at is probably plastic film. They've recently come and had a chat with us about sort of whether we'd be interested in participating as a trial authority for collection of plastic film. That can be collected in the same vehicles as we currently collect our plastic bottles, pots, tubs and trays. Without boring you too much, I'll probably do a separate briefing some other time, but we'd want to keep it separate, so you need the two materials split, but on the basis it's going in the same compartment, we could collect it in what's called a survivor sack. It's basically a film bag that has other bits of plastic film in it. That film bag is really easy to separate from the bottles, pots, tubs and trays at the transfer station, and the film bag and film material all get sent to a film recycling plant. Fairly new and interesting technology, so only being run as a trial to begin with. And if that trial is successful, it's something we can potentially upscale. But I think legislation coming in 3 or 4 years' time is sort of forcing a change in the recycling market as far as that's concerned. In terms of other material like small wee and things, that's something we're looking at. I think starting off, we'd probably want to aim for the biggest volumes first. So small wee isn't a massive component of our black bags, though it's something I'm sort of probably more concerned about from a fire point of view, having batteries in there. So again, it's something we're probably going to take a push on sort of next year. The question is just whether we'd sort of try and direct people to bring sites. Those type of materials are already collected. Supermarkets and things have to, if they sell the materials, they have to have take-back schemes for them. Some of those take-back schemes aren't as sort of accessible and as convenient as a curbside collection. So again, something we're looking at, but we're starting off focusing on higher volumes of material before the smaller volumes. And I think your last question then was roll out the reusable containers. Again, that's sort of, we've had the reusable container grant given to us by Welsh Government. We've purchased the containers and we've got the majority of them now in stock. We're planning on rolling them out in 2025. So one of the things we're going to be doing is, if we're looking at the flexible plastic trial, I didn't want to sort of be aiming to communicate with residents 1 week and saying, here's a bunch of reusable containers, and then a month later saying, here's a flexible plastic sort of thing, can you start using that? We were trying to join them as much as possible, if you like, for those areas. So wanted to get some certainty from Welsh Government on the flexible plastic trial before we started doing reusable containers en masse. Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Mike White or Chris Evans or Matthew, do you want to come back on any of those answers?
No, quite satisfied with the response I've had, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we go on to Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, can I just follow up on one of those answers in terms of other materials which could be collected at the doorstep? Tetra Paks is one possibility, which I think, I take 6 months up to the skip every 6 months worth. But also animal food pouches, millions, literally millions of animal food pouches go to landfill every year. And they are plastic, of course, so they may well be subject to a plastic tax. I mean, is there any looking at either of those for recycling? I mean, even the food pouches at the tips, for example. Question after that answer. Okay. I'll come back after another question.
Yeah, come on, right. Answer that one and then come back, because there's loads of people with questions in now.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so Tetra Paks, we again, from a curbside point of view, they're sort of really small volume, and it's another one where sort of weight-based targets don't sort of do basically just means that sort of we aren't sort of minded to focus on something which is, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's 0.0 something % of our black bag by weight. There's a couple of things that are going to help us in the next couple of years on both Tetra Paks and animal food pouches. Animal food pouches is potentially something which can get captured and collected as a flexible plastic. So we've been in meetings with Welsh Government about what flexible plastics are going to be targeted. It could be carrier bags, it could be sort of bread bags, it could be animal food pouches. And without sort of being overly technical, it literally depends on how much plastic versus metal are in the pouches. So again, we are sort of in discussions with Welsh Government and recyclers to see how wide a scope we can make in terms of sort of targeting which flexible plastics. The other thing that's going to help us is packaging extended producer responsibility is due to come in next year. So one of the bits of legislation the UK government are introducing, and it's designed to get the people who produce packaging to pay the full cost of their collection, disposal, recycling, etc. So next year, anyone who produces a difficult to recycle material is going to end up starting to pay a tax on top of it. So they're going to get sort of minded to sort of either improve their product's recyclability or potentially stop using that type of packaging and start using a different type of packaging. So again, the sort of the market is going to change quite quickly in the next 2 years, and I think up till now, Tetra Paks sort of aren't something we can collect at the curbside. It is something we could probably look at collecting in a couple of years if we find that waste stream is actually still existing. Again, we just have to probably work with the recycling off-takers to find which particular off-taker would better suit that material. Some of our councils in Wales actually put it in with their paper and card, so it's collected as a fibre and the plastic element of it is recycled. Some of the councils in Wales actually collect it in with their bottles, pots, tubs and trays and then separate it out of the bottles, pots, tubs and trays manually and send it off to an individual recycling destination. The trouble with that is it's really expensive for a really small volume. So on a basis we're hitting the 70% target. It's not something we are sort of, I'd recommend we do, certainly not when the recycling market is going to change in the next couple of years' time.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, obviously, reducing is much higher up the waste pyramid than recycling, so we can get that through legislation aspect. My other question is to do with the baling plant. Obviously, what we have there in the baling plant is quite a business in a sense. We're selling lots of stuff that comes in through the shop and various other to various other organisations. So I'm just interested, could we have a detailed report of what exactly we sell from the baling plant? And who to? How is that accounted for, and is it audited? I'd love to see a much more detailed report of exactly how the baling plant operates, what goes out of there, what sort of income comes in, who we sell it to, what we're selling, etc. That would be really interesting. Thank you, Chair.
Matthew, can I suggest that because of the commercial confidentiality that could be included in that at some stage we have that in a closed session?
Yeah, I think that wouldn't be a problem. Is a really sort of short response just for today without doing a load of work. It's sort of some of that is in the financial imps, I think in paragraph 5.1 of the report. So we spend money on certain waste streams and we get money back for other waste streams, is the short answer, councillor. So black bags cost us money. You know, we generally make money from selling plastic bottles, pots, tubs, and trays. So yeah, you know, we can break that down further. We do get audited on it, so it's something we do get picked up in terms of internal and Welsh Government audit. So yeah.
But you also sell rubble, for example, don't you, or push that onto highways? So there's other waste streams there as well going through the baling plant.
Yes, I suppose we are the transfer station for the council. So
Yeah,
effectively the other departments do bring waste into us and ask us to manage it on their behalf, and yeah.
And there's metals going through there as well, which has a value. So there's quite a lot of stuff going through there with the value. So it'd be interesting in more details on that. Thank you.
Councillor Mary Jones. Just to let you know, Matthew, I've got about another 4 or 5 people to ask questions. Oh, you, Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you. I'm hoping I get my questions in the right order, because the piece of pinched one of mine about the Tetra Packs. I think it was earlier this year, the Welsh Government introduced commercial segregation, and I know for a fact that schools were told that they had to start segregating their litter, for example, and I just wondered how successful it's been. I know in one of the schools I'm involved with, they got different coloured bins all around the school for the different types of materials, and I'm wondering how successful it's been across the authority. And the second one is about other premises. I'll use, since the library staff are here, I'll be using them as an example. Last winter, Calais was a warm hub, and Councillor Jeff Jones and myself gave money towards them buying stuff to help it along, i.e. the cups, tea, coffee, etc. We were told this year that they couldn't continue because of the recycling, and they couldn't watch what people put in different bins. But we've noticed in other places, there's quite a lot of things in different places that people are not selling things or providing things because they haven't got litter bins, because they can't see what people are putting into them. And the last one is my favourite one. Only in some areas have we got segregated bins out in the street, and the others, everything goes into the one bag, including the dog mess bags. So I'm just wondering how you're going to get around those bins, since you've just had a bin, I've forgotten the technical title, replacement I'll use, take away some of the dual or triple aspect, and they've only got one bin. Thank you.
I'm taking over from Chris because he's had to leave very temporarily. Matt, do you want to come back on those questions?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Chair and Councillor. Yeah, so Welsh Government introduced workplace recycling laws, which came in from April this year. It defined what a workplace is. So Councillor, if I go to your questions bottom to top, if you like, workplaces are pretty much places where people work. So street litter bins aren't workplaces. So in long story short, the cleansing teams don't, and the public walking down the prom, down the pavement or whatever, aren't obliged to separate recycling to the same degree that that businesses and workplaces are. Our teams don't look after cleansing. That's unfortunately sort of parks and cleansing, different thing. Though if I give you my own personal opinion for what it's worth, just sort of being somebody who lives in Swansea and walks past sort of separated recycling bins, I just from a sort of personal point of view, I end up just having a look at what's in those bins. The recycling isn't separated very well. So even if you give sort of fairly clear instructions on what should go in which compartment on a quad bin, it all just ends up intermixed, which is quite disappointing. But ultimately, the cleansing teams, even where we try and provide recycling, non-recycling facilities, find that those recycling facilities aren't used very well in an on-the-go setting. Because of that, that's part of the reason that sort of Welsh Government and UK Government are looking at some other bits of legislation, predominantly the DRS or Deposit Return Scheme one, which will then sort of prompt consumers to say, well, actually, this container I've bought now has a value on it. I'm, as opposed to throwing it in the bin, I'm hopefully going to be more obliged to take it back to a shop and recover my deposit on it. So, yeah, I don't think on-the-go recycling works particularly well anywhere in the UK. So legislators are making changes on that. Going back to workplace recycling and how effective it's been, it has improved our recycling performance. So this time last year, sort of our first 6 months of the year, we were recycling about 41% of the commercial waste we received or collected. This year, we're recycling over 50% of the commercial waste we received or collected. So it has definitely been an improvement, though, as our sort of report notes. Even though businesses are now separating things a lot better, the fact that we've got a sort of fairly large sort of commercial bunch of businesses who use the council does actually drag our overall recycling performance down. 50% recycling is still not 70% target, so it's doing better, but not not performing as well as we'd like. So picking up a couple of points, how successful is it? If you went, part of our commercial officers' jobs is to just go in and sort of bin dive effectively and check that sort of customers are separating out food, plastic, metals, paper, etc. And it is quite difficult. So it depends on the location. What a lot of sort of businesses are telling us is, we can get our own staff to separate correctly, but where we've got public-facing bins, it's really difficult to get them to do what they should do, and we don't have staff who can just keep on putting hands in bins and separating things correctly. So, using the street litter bin as the example, the public, when given an opportunity to recycle, invariably don't recycle correctly. So I could probably completely understand colleagues in the library saying, actually, if we are trying to provide recycling facilities, the public don't always follow the instructions and separation we're asking them. So given that they potentially sort of face a fine for not separating things properly, I can understand sort of or any workplace's sort of reluctance to have publicly facing bins available, just because unfortunately the public haven't improved their separation as quickly as the workplace recycling legislation required them to.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jetton.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Matt, and you've answered part of my question by talking about the public. Then, well done in achieving 70.5% target. Anyway, the last 30% is probably going to be, if it is ever achievable, is going to be the most difficult part. But actually, going back to the public recycling. What sort of percentage of that 30% is caused by the public not recycling? And you mentioned about, fines being issued and so on. What are we doing to perhaps target that percentage? Or is it a small percentage at the end of the day?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, it is a relatively small percentage. So I think one of the perhaps I'll sort of can send sort of further information out after the meeting. But one of the things Welsh Government do every sort of 5-6 years is they do a waste composition analysis where they go into our black bags of all councils across Wales, take samples and work out sort of how much of that is recyclable, not recyclable, etc. So they did one last in 2022. And what that sort of showed is, I think off the top of my head, it was something like 41% of our black bags are recyclable. But then you've got to subdivide that to things that are recyclable at the curbside versus things that are recyclable at a household waste recycling centre. So, a decent chunk of the bags was plastic film, not currently recyclable. I think a decent chunk of bags was sort of things like absorbent hygiene products, and again they're currently not recyclable. Then you're into things like sort of food waste, which is recyclable, textiles, which is recyclable but not recyclable at the curbside, and then sort of smaller components. So picking up your point, what we aim to do really is engage with the people who aren't really recycling, sort of the heavyweight stuff, and unfortunately do tend to find sort of, find them in blocks. sort of certain wards perform really well, certain wards where we we do have to spend more time. I think as a council, one of the things we've got as a sort of a tool is our keep recycling out policy, which isn't something many other councils in Wales run. So it does allow us to sort of engage with residents and sort of eventually issue fines if their behaviour doesn't improve after we've given them an awful lot of education. We haven't done any large scale sort of keep it out promotions in a while. We've just had the sort of team taking over in areas where our black bag crews tell us that the residents aren't doing a lot of recycling. So it's small scale or smaller scale targeted sort of enforcement activity, which generally it's working okay. It's got us to the sort of 70% recycling target. I think it's a question really about, actually if we had higher targets or if we weren't hitting 70%, then we probably would be putting more resource into it. But for now, I think the amount of resource we're putting in is probably proportionate to the number of residents or the minority of residents who aren't recycling. So yeah, I think short answer, sorry for the long description, is we keep on sort of using targeted enforcement on areas of where we get sort of information to show residents aren't recycling or are just throwing everything in the black bag incorrectly.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Okay, thank you. For Councillor Will Thomas and then Councillor Matthew Jones. Okay, Councillor Will Thomas first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. And first, I'd like to say, congratulations, because I think the authority is obviously doing a very good job on recycling. I was in England recently, and they are a long way behind Welsh councils and certainly Swansea. So well done on that. Obviously, we want to encourage people to recycle as much as possible, and we've talked about the success the council's had with that. But obviously, a lot of people, as Jeff mentioned, do still put things in black bags, and I'm just wondering, excuse my ignorance, but what happens to those black bags at the baling plant? Do they get sifted through manually? And do they go on a conveyor belt and people pick through them, or do they all just go to landfill? And a second question is, with the sort of I suppose machine learning, robotics getting better, is there any investment planned that would help with sifting out sifting out recycling materials? Is there sort of little robots that identify plastic and, for example, and pick it up and put it away, or is that still sort of 10 years off? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So quick answer on black bags is no, we don't sort them. They're just bulked up and sent straight to energy from waste. So we don't sort them. Ultimately, Welsh Government's direction is not to do black bag sort of sorting without boring you with too many details. Everything goes into one bag. Quite a lot ends up just contaminated. So food waste sort of contaminates paper. The plastic producers don't want plastic that's covered in sort of detritus, if only because depending on how quickly they process it, if there's food waste breaking down in there, eventually you'll generate flies, and the facility that takes the dirty and contaminated stuff ends up with vermin and odor problems. So they all specify sort of clean materials. So it does overall just makes black bags sort of split in completely impractical, really, for the most part. So question is, robots. At the moment, the industry are sort of getting far better at sort of putting robots in things. So there are examples of MRF facilities where, if you had a mixture of plastic bottles and Tetra Paks, you can program robots to pick out Tetra Paks or different types of plastic bottles. They're really expensive and quite experimental now, so it takes an awful lot of time for a robot to recognise a Tetra Pak versus a Coke bottle or something, and you get into all manner of sort of again, Mr. Smith was saying earlier, devil's in the detail. You need a belt which has got one layer of material going quite slowly across it for the robot arm to have time to go off and pick things, whereas the volumes we're talking about as a council, our plastic belt goes through, not one layer of material and far too quick for a robot. So it's they are useful and starting to come in, but in targeted areas. We have been in discussion with sort of potential people who are generating and sort of developing robots, where they basically told us we haven't got any applications on site where they currently could use them. Not to say we won't in the future, but currently robots aren't something which would be any use to Swansea.
Okay, Matthew. Councillor Matthew Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Matthew's getting all right going over today, isn't he, in fairness to him? You mentioned food waste a couple of times there, Matthew, and obviously I think the last waste analysis done in 2022, I'm not sure if I read that food waste was one of the main contaminants in black bag waste. Always amazes me that people choose to get rid of it fortnightly rather than recycle it weekly, to be honest, and the adverse effect it has on the cleanliness of our streets when food waste gets put in black bags with animals and such targeting these black bags. So I know there's been targeted media from Welsh Government in the past, and I think Swansea Council. Are there any plans again to target the recycling of food waste, because it's massive, isn't it, with regards to what we can do for our compostable waste as well?
Thank you,
Matthew.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, and I haven't got the figures in front of me, I think food waste is something like 18% of our weight of black bags, and believe it or not, that's actually really good. So a couple of years ago, it was 30-odd%. Quite a lot of councils in Wales, it's still around about 30-odd%. So our 3-bag limit and keep recycling out, are sort of effective policies. But 18% is still a big number. I completely agree. I think, yeah, you're right. Sort of continuing sort of enforcement and communication is key to try and minimise it and recycle it if we can't minimise it. So I think our plans really were to, we are going to be doing public-wide comms next year in terms of rolling out reusable containers. It'd be an obvious time to sort of to make sure that message is included as well. So I think focus of the comms will be to, here's a new reusable container, these are the materials you're getting in, and make sure that part of the rollout works really well, but also just using it as an opportunity to sort of remind people of what's in their black bags, what we collect at the curbside, and make sure they are recycling as fully as they can do.
Okay, Matthew, is that okay? Any other members got any other questions for the list? I think we've covered just about everything under the sun. And I think, is there anything else we haven't covered, Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Off the top of my head, I can't think of it. I don't think there's anything left in my head that I haven't already said. Thanks.
I have something.
Oh, Councillor Black has something. I thought he might have dug something up from somewhere.
There's a report going to Scrutiny Programme Committee this evening on the Council's compliments and complaints annual report. And I noticed that there's been a huge increase in complaints against waste management, largely I think because of the issues we've had with the collection and stuff. I'm just wondering, how do we evaluate those complaints and how do we address them as they come in, and to try to make sure to reduce them in future? I'm asking this now because I won't have anyone in front of me this evening to ask that question.
Right, who's going to take that one? Nigel, Matthew?
I think it's probably me again. So very sorry, Council, I haven't seen that report, so I'll try and give an answer as best as I'm able. Yes, we've had some service issues this year, so in reality, what we do is every time we receive a corporate complaint, we look to sort of identify what the issue is and resolve the issue, which is sort of slightly different from missed collections and service requests. So without seeing the report, I think my sort of slightly cagey answer, I'm sorry, is corporate complaints get picked up by one of the collection supervisors, investigated, resolved, and response goes back to residents. Missed collection service requests are sort of are picked up if the team spot that we're having recurring issues. So if the sort of supervisor and admin team spot we're having repeated issues, we step in and sort of almost do a sort of corporate complaint response, if you like, sort of identify root cause and resolve, so it doesn't head on and escalate to a corporate complaint. Though this year, with the issues we have had, we've had less time to focus on individual ones. My expectation is we resolve the service issues and then our complaint numbers would go back down to normal levels, if you like.
I mean, these are corporate complaints, not miscollections, but I think it's worth you having a look at the report, at some stage if you can. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mike White, you put your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to jump in Defence's department, it's the most high-profile service that any council provides is obviously refuse collection. They say, and it's going to, get a lot of volume of complaints, but sometimes some of the issues that crop up, the people perhaps don't think to ask why they had a collection, or the issues about the collection, because, as I say, there are issues where it's totally out the control of the service being provided. But I think if people perhaps asked as to why there's an issue with the service, I think they wouldn't perhaps be so ready to complain, and obviously appreciate what the service is doing for the public.
I have to say this, Mike. I don't think anybody was complaining about the service, and nobody was criticising the service. But I think there was a question that there is a report this afternoon, as you know, Mike, with complaints and compliments to the authority. And I think what Councillor Black was doing is asking how, if the complaints go through to the Waste Department, how they are dealt with as well. So I think that's I don't normally defend Councillor Black, but on this occasion, I do have to defend him.
It's true, he doesn't defend me. No, I just want to highlight it because it seems to me that we have a complaints service. And when you have an issue arising from that, they don't always feed back to the department that this is the annual report. And it just seems to me that that sort of silo mentality doesn't help in future in terms of complaints. That if there's a trend identified in the annual complaint report, it should be mentioned to the department concerned so they're aware of that. Yeah.
Okay. There can't be anybody else to ask Matthew or Nigel anything. I think we've asked about everything. Okay, Nigel, on behalf of the committee, can I thank you very much for your attendance, yours, Lisa and Nigel. Obviously, Councillor Black has asked for a detailed breakdown of what our costs and what we get in income and what we spend but that again that can come at a later date. But apart from that, can I thank you all very much for your attendance? You're more than welcome to stay. We're now going to do the report on public library standards in Wales. You may be interested in that. You can stay if you wish to. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 8, is the annual report on public library standards for Swansea libraries. Now, Councillor Elliot King, are you online?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Oh, you are. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, apologies for not being there in person. Yeah, thank you very much. This is obviously our annual report that actually we.
Excuse me, Councillor King. Have you got your camera available, or is there a difficulty?
Yes, I've got problems with my internet because I moved house yesterday and I'm waiting for it to be installed. So I'm using my 4G. So apologies for that, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Carry on.
Yep. So, So I know the officers are with you in the room. So nothing I really wanted to add to the report. So I'll hand you over to the officers if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. So, can I welcome Karen Gibbons and Karen Davis, who are the library service manager and principal librarian, and welcome. And you must have been very, very interested in our waste disposal discussions. And I think you could probably write a book on it now, could you? But there we are. So Now it's over to you for your annual report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you about our annual report. So just to remind you all, so every year the Welsh Public Library Service submits data to the Welsh Government as part of the Welsh Public Libraries framework. That report, it entails us collecting a lot of data during the year and a lot of case study information and qualitative data as well. And we submit all that in an Excel spreadsheet to the Welsh Government annually to do. And at the moment, we're reporting to the Welsh Public Library Framework 6, Ambitious and Connected. That's been extended for a few years, but the new one is due out next year, I believe. So we will be on a new framework next year. So we have 17 public libraries in Swansea. 16 of them are we use the data to report to for the public library standards. One of mine library is very small. It's open for less than 10 hours, and therefore the data we capture from that library doesn't count in the statistical return. But we know we have 17 libraries. So one of my libraries open every day on a Friday. So the other 16 libraries we report the data on. The data. The reason for the Welsh Public Libraries framework is to superintend the responsibilities of the local authority that the local authorities have in delivering a public library service under the Public Libraries Act 1964. So it's the way they go about testing to see how well the local authority is providing that legislative service. So this year we had a report back just a few weeks ago on the year 23-24. So it's the data ending for March 31st, 2024. So we had to evidence 13 core entitlements, which is part of the framework. The sort of thing that you'll find in the core entitlements is whether or not we provide books for free, we're open and accessible to all, we have qualified and experienced staff. There's a big range of them, and we have to demonstrate in a qualitative terms how we demonstrate that we meet all those core entitlements, and we were shown to meet all 13 of them. We also have 16 quality indicators, so like key performance indicators that we have to demonstrate how we perform against. 7 of which of these have targets and the others are benchmarked. We'll come into more detail about them further on in the report, so just keep that in the back of your mind for now. We also submit a case study that demonstrates the impact that the service has on individuals or a group. And this year it was a former prisoner, I believe, who attended one of our libraries, and we'll come to that later. We also have to describe how the library service contributes to the Welsh Government's priorities and its strategic goals, and provide some information about our future direction for the library service. So the information and the detail is in the appendices. So the one we're going to be referring mostly to today is Appendix B, but you can see other information in those appendixes should you wish to. So in summary, the Swansea met all of the 13 core entitlements. 7 of the quality indicators we reported on. 4 we met in full, 1 in part, and the remainder we did not meet. The remaining 2 targets which we didn't meet, we'll talk about later, and we'll come back to later. And one of them in particular is about spending on the Welsh book budget, spending on Welsh books from our acquisitions budget. Swansea Libraries continues to perform well or compares well with other authorities in many ways, in particular on virtual visits, on our active borrowers, so that's the number of people that come through the door and borrow books, our loans of materials, especially digital content, and there have been significant increases in event attendance and in general user support data that we captured during that period. I think we've benefited from some of the coastal funding and some of the warm spaces funding that we've applied for grants for, and that's how allowed us to deliver some additional events during that period. Swansea continues to perform less well in terms of acquisitions budgets and the number of qualified staff and the amount of time staff devote to training. We're addressing all of those as best we can each year, and some of those will not be new to you, and they're things we would have reported on in previous years as well. The service is assessed as clearly making efforts to better understand and improve in these areas. So I think the Welsh Government have addressed that. They're recognising none of the things we don't do well, we're not getting worse at, and we're making improvements on most of them. And in particular, they referenced the way that we've addressed the poor response we got from a survey we did for children and their use of the library service, and they referenced the fact that we've done additional work since that time. So I'm going to hand over to Karen Davis now, who's going to talk to you a bit more about some of the detail behind those comments and those statements. And I'll come back to you in a moment.
So we thought members might be interested. We thought members might be interested in some of the areas where perhaps we did notably much better this year, and perhaps some of the areas we still need to work on, as Karen sort of mentioned in her introduction. So the part of the report, which is, if you look at the appendices, it's page 456, which is the meat of the report. And these are the quality indicators and impact measures, where it's the very much data-led stuff. It's the less qualitative stuff, where we've got facts and figures. As Karen said, we're benchmarked with others or targets against. So firstly, two that we're particularly proud of this year are our events attendance and our user education, whether that's formal or informal education. Events attendance has gone up by 48% this year. So to give you an idea, that's 80,000 attendances at events and activities we ran in libraries, or actually we did as outreach activities into the community. That could be the sort of our stuff that goes on weekly or bi-weekly in libraries, which we'd all be familiar with, story times, rhyme times, clubs and societies and things. Or it could be big one-off thematic things we do seasonally, or family fun days, or things we might do for Libraries Week, or perhaps creative things we do, people who come in and author visits, this kind of thing. We think a little bit of the story behind that is we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years to understand what it is people want from us. We've got a very good coordinator now for these things. The libraries are very in tune with their communities and what works well. We've done a lot with our evaluation to understand what it is people enjoy or want more of. And we think it's paying dividends. And also the funding Karen mentioned. I think Warm Spaces funding has been very welcome, coastal funding, and we've tried to maximise that as much as we can within our capacity to deliver things. And very much appreciated by our customers, and we get very good satisfaction levels on that. And then also user education. This can be informal stuff, so it's helping people ad hoc with a lot of it's digital support, to be honest. It's about helping people to do things online. We think in this particular reporting period, a lot of it was happening around the cost of living stuff and helping people access things. And we're finding more and more people perhaps have their own devices, etc., particularly after COVID, but they don't actually know how to use them terribly well. So we do a lot with reassuring people about online safety, but also help to actually use some of our library resources as well and to access things. So that's gone up by 26% this year. And we're in the top median comparatively against all the other libraries in Wales for these things too. So that's 34,000 people we helped in that way. Now, formally, this is the most marked one, formal user support has gone up by 158%, which is quite phenomenal. And to give you an idea, that's about 6,500 people over the course of this reporting period who actually benefited from more formal support. Again, we think the story behind that is we've been working in partnership a lot with others. So I know COVID seems like a long time ago in some ways, doesn't it? But before COVID and during COVID, a lot of stuff declined just because it was quite hard to deliver. But a lot of things like IT classes are coming back into the library. So we work with lifelong learning. We work with partners from outside the council as well. So the colleges, Learn Direct, etc. So they're using our libraries as bases to reach people who need that sort of support. We're also doing more stuff around engaging with schools and the new schools curriculum and helping teachers and pupils to understand how the library can help them. And just more things that we've always done, sort of local history, inductions of local history groups into how to use our resources to help with their work, etc. And working with the Fusion programme as well and employability services. So all these things, I think, have worked towards more formal, if you like, learning opportunities happening in the library. And we've achieved 91% satisfaction levels with when people do attend, this actually met their needs. So that's two indicators we're particularly proud of. Moving on to library memberships, Karen mentioned these are active borrowers during these. Well, active members, so they might borrow things either physically or electronically, but they might also come in to use things like our library computers. You have to have a membership for that. Now this has declined slightly, 5% down, but again, we're in the top quartile for Wales, and that's normalised for population. So it's not just the fact that we're a big authority, that's per thousand population, we're, I think, third highest membership. So although it's declined slightly, there's still 38,000 people who are actively using their library membership. And just to put that in context, some of the things we've just talked about, to attend some of those events and to get some of that support, you don't actually need to be a library member. So that's other people, again, who might not actually be a library member. And some of the things which we've traditionally provided or actually improved and modernised over the last year or going back to this reporting period, like our library Wi-Fi and the bring your own device print service, which members were very interested in last year because it was new. And we did a lot of work on the advice of Scrutiny to promote that a bit more, and that's been hugely successful. I think there's about 2,000 print jobs a week people are doing. You don't actually, again, need to be a member to do those things. So if you look at the membership figures in that context, it does sort of, visits are up by 17%. So although membership's gone down slightly, more people are actually coming in than the period before. So I think that moves on nicely to, I think, what Karen wanted to talk about with actually our book stock.
Yeah, thank you. So the other area we don't do so well in is our material spend on purchased books, and this has been historic really, and we're such a big authority that the ask is quite high of us in the standards, so it's probably not a surprise that we don't meet it, and other large authorities struggle in the same way. Nevertheless, it's something we aspire to, and we will always target that materials budget where we can. So I just wanted to mention one of the good things that we're doing is the demand for digital materials is increasing, and we're seeing more and more people are borrowing ebooks, e-resource, e-magazines, e-audiobooks. The trend continues to move in an upward direction, so we are investing our materials budget in more digital resources. So it's a good story, and we're looking at, and we're changing as time goes on in how much physical stock we buy compared to digital resources. Currently, most of our book budget, it goes into the physical books that we see on the shelves, but it's moving in a different direction. So our resourcing budget, the budget we have to buy books, and Ben Smith's alluded to earlier on, we sat through his, budget pressures are huge. So our resources haven't gone up over years. So we continue to do what we can to make sure that the budgets that we have to spend on books and materials are spent in the best possible way. We are part of an All Wales Stock Consortium, so all of the library authorities across Wales, I think all of them, I think it's all 22. We're part of a consortium where we go out to procure suppliers for books and other materials, and that helps us get a better financial settlement for as far as the cost of delivery of the books and the discounts we get on purchasing of books. So in this context, libraries are focusing on ensuring that we get the best return on items purchased, and we continue to monitor those trends. And I know this year that the consortium contract is up for renewal and being looked at as we speak. In terms of the Welsh language, which is one of the other indicators we don't meet, we're not very far off from meeting it, and I'm working really hard this year within this financial year to try and make sure we will achieve that target in the future. So I think I made a notice of it. I think we're just a few £1,000 short of meeting the target. We've limited ourselves in the past because our Welsh language loans were so low, but we're seeing an increase in Welsh language material loans. So I think that's inspiring us to find more ways to be to buy Welsh books. And so we buy all the Welsh books that are published, but we've got to buy them in different quantities and make sure we target them in the right places. So we're working on that now. I think we'll have a better response for you in future years on that one. The next one I wanted to mention was another target which we don't meet, which is qualified staff within the library service. We recently had an experience where a member of the senior team left for another post. They were a qualified librarian. We went out 3 times to get a qualified person. In the end we've been we've turned that around, and we've recruited from within the service and are heavily encouraging that person to qualify within their role. So it's quite difficult. I think it's because we are in a university town. There's 2 universities here. They have many libraries, and they pay their library professionals a little bit more. So I think we have that kind of competition for staff who may be in the area, and moving. I think we are quite a small specialist area sector, and there just aren't enough people around to apply for those posts. So we're looking at this, and we're looking at taking up opportunities that the Welsh Government provide in supporting for qualification route, and supporting a new route where you can accredit your in-work training and become a chartered librarian, and that would help us meet this target better as well. Even if there wasn't an underlying library qualification, it would have demonstrated from within the workplace that they are sufficiently well knowledgeable to get the title of a chartered librarian. So we're working on that as well. And we also very much we've got a workforce restructure paper at the moment, which is live. And part of that is phase B is to introduce low-level apprenticeships into the library service so that we build to the future, and this becomes an easier target in years to come for us to meet. And the next one is another target which me to, and Karen's offered to talk a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so this sits with me for my sins. So this is about staff training. So we've been working really hard on this, and again, we've reported on this in previous years. We've doubled the amount of staff hours, or the proportion of staff hours that staff spend on training this year. And we've met the old target, but Welsh Government have shifted the goalposts and introduced a new target. So the old target was looking for 1% of staff time that's spent on training and staff development opportunities, which we've exceeded by 0.1%. And now it's 2% target. So it's continuous improvement, which I hope members will be happy with. To be fair, some of this is down to us focusing on it and encouraging staff to make not just use of formal training. People think of it as going on courses traditionally, but we look for sort of more like development opportunities, and a lot of what colleagues have been doing around some of the other areas that we've just talked about, like going out into the community and working with others, offer opportunity for continuing professional development. But the other element has been recording. So what has helped us this year to an extent is we've always been suspected that we've been under-reporting then. So people are doing the training, which is the important thing, but I'll be capturing the data. So Oracle Fusion, which I know has been a bit of a challenge in lots of ways for the council over the last couple of years, but actually we've seen a big benefit to that. Previously, the only way we could record staff training is own little homemade spreadsheets and Microsoft Forms and things like that. So we think things were falling through the cracks. So at least now with Oracle Fusion and self-service for staff on that, anything that's organised and delivered through the local authority gets captured almost automatically. So we think that's really helping. And it does provide actually a really simple way for colleagues to capture external learning as well. So the next thing we're working on is reminding staff that every time you have a learning opportunity, capture it in your Fusion, and that's building slowly. And the other thing I think that's helped last year is we all had to redo our mandatory training with Fusion coming in anyway, which wasn't bad timing for us because we found colleagues during COVID, when for a couple of months people had to work at home, it was good use of their time. That was coming up for 2-3 years, needing refreshing anyway, so it was good timing. So we think the mandatory training probably helped towards that target, but we're trying to spend a bit more time now, that's under our belts, on library specific training, and that's just coming to fruition now. And we're just about to launch tomorrow our new library management system. So all staff have been trained entirely on our system, which deals with all our customer records, all our stock records, all our transactional records. We've all had to prepare for the new system coming in tomorrow. So that will hit our figures next year. So that's been a massive development opportunity. So good news, but we still haven't met the target. We've worked really hard on that one. And then I think the last one I wanted to finish on really was the impact statement. So traditionally, I think members have been very interested in our case studies, because these are stories which I think bring all of this data to life, what this actually means for people. And we've had to report up to 6 different case studies in the past, but this year, as Karen says, we're going into a new framework. So we think this is because it's the last of the framework, and they've been very data heavy this year. They've only asked for one. So the one we chose because we thought, from all the stories about all the feedback we've had from customers about how the libraries improve their lives, this was the one which for us we thought might be meaningful, because it's not a typical sort of person you would think perhaps uses the library or typically what libraries do. So this was a gentleman coming out of Swansea prison, as sadly happens these days, often comes out of prison with no home, a tent. He was living in a tent. He was being supported by Housing Options. He was supported by Probation Service and other agencies and other parts of the council. But he found that the library was a place he could come every day. This was sort of hinting about the time of warm spaces and all of the provision that was in there then. So he found it somewhere he could come. Obviously, staff were doing their best to support him, just signpost him to other things he might not know about, to listen to what he was struggling with in terms of just being able to integrate back into the community. Didn't have any local support otherwise. But what was nice is his feedback to us once he got himself sorted and found a home and started to not, if you like, rely on the library so much in that way, was that he said it wasn't even so much about the services we provided, it was the kindness. It was the fact that staff treated him with dignity and respect, which isn't something always he experienced in the community. And he was somebody of worth and somebody who deserved their service. And also, as a little nice rider to that story, didn't see him quite so much then, but he came back, and he came back with his new partner and a daughter. So this was a lady who didn't use the library, didn't know what was there for them as a family, and brought them along to story time and activity for her daughter. And so he's acting as an advocate for us now, which is a nice little rider to that. So I think that probably adds a little bit more meaning to some of those sort of figures that we reported on earlier. So I think that was it in terms of the sort of content of the report that we thought might be of most interest.
Just to sum up, so we'll be concentrating on maintaining our good performance that we already deliver, focusing on those areas of concern about spending on materials budgets, staff qualifications, Welsh language materials and training, and those will be the things to focus our mind this year. And the other things we've got ahead of us are Stover planning, which we are busy involved with. The library management system transfer, which is a huge thing, and next year is 150 years. So from 2025, Swansea Library Service will be 150 years old. Our first library was in St Helens in 1875. So we're planning on making a bit of a fuss about that. So you might get bored of hearing about it. So it's 1 year after the Ali Palace in London, actually. So we were 1 year behind them. So that's what we'll be doing for the year ahead. So thank you very much.
Well, I thank you very much, both of you, for a very interesting report. I know our own little author would like to ask you a question. Councillor Black.
Actually, it's nothing to do with the book.
Have you booked through like that?
No. I don't think that. Can I have declare an interest then? It's about the buildings more than anything else. When the other ward colleague, not this one, was in charge of libraries back in 2012, there were a number of library buildings coming near to the end of their useful life. I'm just wondering what the current situation is. I mean, Forest Park, Pennard, I think Scrutiny had issues as well. Just wondering what the current situation is with regard to the condition of the buildings.
I don't know if Elliot King wants to answer anything, but from my perspective, we had some condition surveys written, which are a few years old now, and they identified any of the critical issues that were needed to be addressed. Scrutiny was one in particular. I think Forest Park and Pennard might have been in there as well. So works have taken place in all of those sites to maintain their building integrity, and building service will continue to support us where they need to. So that's as much as I can say on that, really, and that we rely on corporate building services to support.
What about functionality? Because I mean, obviously we're getting this massive investment in this central library now, but and that's going to be far more functional and accessible in a sense because of that. But in terms of those community libraries, what about the functionality of those particular buildings?
We're currently working with an organisation, and it's been funded by shared prosperity funding, to look at whether public libraries can be have a place as community hubs, and part of that is them looking at the buildings, nature of the buildings, and whether there are opportunities in any of them to be improved, or whether they can currently fine but could be used differently. So when that paper comes out, that might explore some of those issues a bit more. I don't know if Elliot wants to add anything else in about that.
Has Elliot adding anything?
Did you mind me to come in, Chair?
Yeah, by all means, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Karen. I think really that is the sort of the main thing is really around the community hubs project and the review there. So that is looking right across all of the libraries. So especially looking at what we've got and the conditions, etc. And I think members have had an opportunity to have an input into that as well by the questionnaire. But I think that's the key thing, is looking really at the, what the model is for the future in terms of the community hubs, but making sure then if there is a need for investment, then we consider that. But as I've repeated before, we're not planning on making any closures of libraries.
Well, I didn't suggest you were earlier, and hopefully that's the case. And thank you for that. I know Bryn Hopeful Library, my local library, has got a very good community hub, but I think Scrutiny will be interested in seeing that report when it comes available, so, so we can have an input into its outcome as well, if that's possible.
Okay, Councillor David Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great report, girls. Thank you very much. And what I'd like to know is, of the 17 libraries, how many staff have you got full-time and part-time? And if you've got any long-term sick in them facilities?
I haven't got that information at my fingertips exactly. We have a lot, but so I can supply that to Scrutiny to the future date.
We'll put it in a letter to you, and then you can reply it to us in when you can, in a letter telling us what those figures are.
I think the WPLS references is 73 FTE equivalents across all of our library sites and our library headquarters, and then I can break that down into part-time and full-time for you. If that's what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Because that will be dated now. That's last year's data, but it is about that.
Yeah, and if you've got any long-term sick that's affecting the service?
We do. I mean, I think also it comes in cycles. We do have staff off on long-term sick, which we manage as per the absence policy. But yes, we do.
Okay.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. First question. Obviously, you said that the investment in books was less due to the demand of electronic things such as not so much podcasts, sorry, but audio books increasing. Just wondering, obviously, when children come into the library, they don't necessarily always take the books away, and I think having the kids' corner always replenished with new books, is that something that's slightly different to the other part of your service? Because I think obviously it's certainly an Oystermouth library in Mumbles. I know that's a very popular thing. So that's my first question. The second one was, does the service ever accept donations of books? I mean, obviously a lot of people drop them off at charity shops or book exchanges and things like that. And I'm just wondering the amount that probably go to landfill. Does the council accept donations of large collections, or is it something that's too much hassle, I suppose, to administer? Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
I'll just take the last part of your question first. So we do take donations of new books that meet our stock policy. We wouldn't encourage large donations because then they are difficult for us to manage and for us to process. But people regularly turn up in our community libraries and they've got a handful of books that they're having to clear out in their lounge, and they want to know if we can take some of them. And if they meet our stock policy criteria and are relatively new and there is a place for them and they'll be borrowed by other customers, we welcome them. But sometimes we have to say no, and sometimes they're not suitable. As concerns children's book libraries, so we report as far as the Welsh Public Library standards and what proportion of our book spend we spend on children's books, and they ask us to tell them that, so they are checking that we are investing sufficiently well enough in children's stock, in as well as books in general. And just to be clear, we report on the spend of books, not the quantity of books we buy. So it's really about the spending of the books that we don't meet, the amount of money we spend on them. So we could buy less books, but buy a lot of really expensive books, and we would meet the target, which seems a bit silly. So we do our due diligence then, ensure that we buy books which are good value and which are going to be used, not just expensive books.
Okay, thank you. Well,
thanks, Chair. So thanks for coming back. Just wondering what happens to the you mentioned you had a policy of what books that you want to stock. Obviously, I'm guessing some of those titles drop out of that policy. What happens to those books, and what sort of numbers are we talking about, and how does the council get rid of those? Do they give them to charity shops, or do they go to landfill? Thanks.
So we only buy things that are within our stock policy. So that reduces that sort of quota down. Once books get to a certain age, we do weed stock, and all library services will do this. And have always done it since the beginning of time. So we weed stock, and we will offer them to, there are certain charities around. Better World Books is one of them. There's a few, there's a couple of others. I shouldn't name them all really. And we offer them to those charities. They give us some money, some remuneration to books that they go on and resell. If they get, some of them they might send on to other countries. There's lots of different ways that they then repurpose those books. Some of them will go to landfill, and they will be repurposed as paper waste as well. We do create some paper waste ourselves from books which are worn out, which are not suitable to go to those services. We will then be part of the new waste strategy, which we heard about earlier on, and we will have to pay for the disposal of those books. So taking on the right books is really important to us, because we want to make sure that the books that we buy are getting read by as many people as possible, and reduce the amount of unnecessary waste that we have coming out the other side of the story.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, can we go on to Councillor Mike White?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just following on, obviously, when you come to speak just recently, it was recommended, obviously, to get more engagement with local schools. I know that we did through the promotion in Brynavred, because the children there do use it, but also by talking with other schools within the area as well. I believe we got 5 or 6 primary schools that are now visiting Brynavred Library, which is brilliant, you know, to see the children there. Another point I'd like to raise, Chair, is would it be possible, perhaps, if we could talk to our colleagues in community buildings, because we got community centres within our wards as well. Perhaps if they had a sort of reader's corner there where some books could be provided, because not every area have got a library, you know, within their area. That was just a thought I had, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor White. I'll ask the professionals to answer, and then I'll give you a bit of a background about the community use of the library use of community buildings.
Hi, something we could look into. We can certainly put book deposits into community centres. We need to make sure that sometimes when our library becomes sort of starts putting roots into community centres, it becomes a library and not a community centre, and you must make sure that doesn't happen for the benefit of the community centre as much as anything. However, there's certainly scope where there is a need for us to put some book deposits into community centres, and we can certainly explore that. And if councillors have any suggestions of within their wards of areas where they think that would be useful, we certainly can explore it.
Thank you. This has been explored for many years, about especially where, you know, we had buildings like Forest Park and like Scrutiny, where we could move those libraries into community buildings. The big problem is the continuous use. If you have a library which is open during the day, community centres may not be. And the fact is that it's like when you put a library adjacent to a school, like you've got in St Thomas, it's the community, it's the use of that library, and the fact that it's open much longer than a community centre or a school and at different hours, and then becomes an issue about management, and it's a management of that facility. But it's worth exploring again, especially if you've got community centres that are now self-managed. There may be an element by which you could look at it then. The problem, I say, with schools is the fact that how they are, the timing and what have you. The other thing that was looked at some stage was actually asking some of the businesses. And one of those businesses I can remember being asking about was one with community rooms. I'll give you an example. Forest Park Tesco's in Llansamlet had a large community room, which at one stage was discussed with them about having that used as a library. But as you rightly said, that it stops being a community room and becomes a community library, and that's one of the management structure in Tesco's was against that. But there are options of that type of community facility, which is available in many different areas. And I should imagine there's that facility might be available in the Albert Hall, or might be available now in the Palace Theatre, which might be worth having a discussion, because you know there's no public library within easy distance of the Palace Theatre. So I think all those elements need to be looked at.
They did it in Skewen, so
Yeah.
it might be worth looking how they did it in Skewen. It's in the hall there, isn't it? Yeah.
So we've got Councillor Chris Evans.
Yeah, just a quick one to finish. Which library management system did you end up going with? And what do you think are going to be the main benefits of it?
So this is an all Wales procurement. So all 22 local authorities in Wales, we're all offline as we speak and about to go online tomorrow with Spider, which is a Civica product. And it was procured by the lead authority was Gwynedd County Borough Council on that project. So we're all like bated breath and fingers crossed to see that it all Wales comes back up. So yeah.
I think benefits wise, I think in this procurement compared to the system we've got now, which is I think it's about seven years old. We haven't been with it for 7 years, but the contract was for 7 years, hence need for procurement. We've tried to because times have moved on. I think in this specification we've gone very much for weighted on what they call the discovery platform, which is how customers can interface with it in a much more modern way online, particularly. And it might be to do traditional book loan type stuff like reserving books and things like that. But one of the benefits of the system is yet to be seen, but we hope is very much the online presence. So you customers should get a bit more of like have to use the Amazon, the A word, but the Amazon experience of, you've a little bit more intelligent stuff behind you. You've enjoyed these things in the past, so you might enjoy these things, those sort of recommendation things, which the current interface isn't able to do. We'll be able to put all our events stuff on there, whereas currently that all sits on the council website, so it's a little bit divorced from our catalogue pages. We've got it now, so we hope, to answer your question about benefits, there's the all Wales element to it, so we can obviously give people a window on for libraries in other parts of the country as well, should they. A lot of people do live on the border and are members, for instance, in Neath Talbot and members in Swansea, etc. But we hope one of the main benefits is going to be that customer interface, the library app and things like this. So it's yet to be seen. Just tomorrow, we're just hoping we can get the thing switched on and we can actually issue some books and join some customers and tell them where we are with things. And then we're going to build on that from there. But it's got a lot of functionality and it's in use in a lot of public libraries in the UK. So we hope to learn from the experience of others who've gone before us as well.
Well, good luck with that. Any other questions or comments? No. I have a couple of questions. The first question I ask is, could we have a list of the use of the individual libraries, please? It is very important that we have that, so that if we are asked in future, why are you keeping that library, or we can prove that it's being used. I think that's the first one. And the other one is if we could get some sort of idea of what our stock levels are. So again, if people ask us, why are we spending all this money, and what are we spending on, we can say we've got books, 20,000 books, and what the percentage of Welsh or English, whatever. I think those figures the public always look to find out what they're getting for their value for money. So that's basically it. Apart from that, can I thank you all very much for coming, a pair of you, and thank you very much for it. I just check it to see I'm doing the right thing. I got the right order. Okay, thank you very much indeed, both Karens. Thank you. Work plan this is just for the members. Work plan is on page 44. And the next one is the 14th of January, budget proposals, and then the revenue performance reports for both quarter twos. Okay. And then there's letters. See the letters? Okay. Any questions or comments on either of them? Seeing as there's hardly anybody left here, I don't think there are. Okay, well, thank you all very much for your attendance. I do appreciate it. Thank you.